From MNTech, the Micro Nanotechnology Education Center, this is Talking Technicians, the podcast about technicians, who they are, what they do, and where they come from. I'm your host, Peter Kazarnoff. I teach technicians and engineers at Portland Community College. In each episode, you'll meet a working technician and hear their story. That means real interviews with real technicians about real jobs. At the end of each episode, you'll hear actions you can take if you want to be a technician too. In this episode, you'll meet Sean. Sean works at JPL, located in Pasadena, California, but Sean's remote in Portland, Oregon. Sean, welcome to Talking Technicians.
Hey, Peter. Happy to be here.
So tell me about yourself. Where do you live and how long have you been there for?
So I currently live in Portland, Oregon, and I've been here for about 10 years. I moved here right after I graduated from college the first time, or I guess the only time I've graduated from college. So 10 years I've been here.
And I mentioned in the intro that you work for JPL. What does JPL stand for, and where's that compared to where you are, and how do you do that?
So JPL stands for Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and they're one of the many NASA centers around the U.S., NASA being the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. You may have heard of Houston or Cape Canaveral. JPL is just another NASA center, and it's located in Pasadena, California, which is basically part of Los Angeles in Southern California.
But you work remotely in Portland, Oregon. How does that work?
Right. So most of the work I'm doing for JPL is software focused at the moment. I'm doing some modeling work, and we can go into what that means a little bit later. But basically, I just work from my computer at home. If in different times, I would have been, if there wasn't a global pandemic going on, I probably would have been in Pasadena doing my internship there. But given the circumstances, I'm happy to, work remotely.
And what's your job title at JPL? What do you do day to day?
I suppose I'm a research intern at the moment. The day-to-day work can really change. In some sense, a lot of it is an educational experience. I work for a science team that works on modeling basically how ice sheets evolve through time and the subsequent sea level rise. And so we're doing really detailed modeling to try to do predictions into the future of what the effects of climate change or other factors might be.
How much do interns make at JPL and NASA?
That's a good question. And I actually had a previous NASA internship over the last summer that paid the same. So I can say that JPL and NASA and other NASA centers paid the same. I did the math, and it's roughly $17 an hour. But we're paid in three big lumps as a stipend, basically. So for 16 weeks of work, I made somewhere around $11,000.
And you mentioned that you do software modeling. What does that entail, and what kind of skills have you learned to be able to do that kind of work?
Sure. So here at JPL, the software package is it's called the Ice Sheet and Sea Level System Model, and it's been written by a team of scientists at JPL and University of California, Irvine over the past decade or so. And as part of some cutting edge research they're doing on ice sheet modeling and sea level modeling. Most of that software is all written in C, the C programming language that does all of the back end work. But for me, what I'm working in and what most of the interns are working in and what anyone who would use this software, except for the developers, are working in is MATLAB. And so there's basically an interface of MATLAB on top of the C language that allows us to do stuff a little more easily. And day to day, I am doing toy models. Maybe I'm doing an experiment saying, like, let's say that 100 meters of ice melted all across Antarctica. What is the subsequent sea level rise in Tokyo? Or, so I might set up that as a toy model. Or I might be, one of the big projects that I'm working on right now with some other interns is we're working on creating some algorithms that are able to map coastlines from satellite data. And, hopefully in the future, we can use that algorithm to track how coastlines are evolving as we have more and more satellite data over the next decades and even centuries.
That sounds really neat. Are there any opportunities for professional growth at JPL and NASA?
I'm sure there are. Within the context of an internship, I know the path is a little strange. One of the people I work with is a full-time intern and a PhD student, and basically his job, so to speak, how he pays his bills is he is a full-time intern for this team while he's getting his PhD. As far as permanent positions, I know that JPL and NASA in general have a sort of breakdown of different types of employees. A lot of them are contractors, but NASA also has a lot of what they would call civil servants, so permanent employees. And as far as I know, the civil servant positions are relatively difficult to get because only a fixed number of them exists, because these are government organizations and they don't tend to grow very much. And so positions only open as people retire. But the contract positions are often open up as needed as big projects come along. Like, let's say a rover's going to Mars, they need to bring on a bunch of people in all kinds of disciplines to help out. So there's definitely opportunities for growth in that sense. To be honest, I'm not super keyed into a lot of the internals of how that would work. But certainly as an intern, if I had the time, the team that I'm working with would be happy to keep having me on.
How did you land an internship at NASA and JPL? What was your work and your education experience before working there?
Sure. So I've had sort of a interesting journey. The short answer is I applied for it and got the right letters of recommendation and had the right classes and had the right set of, or like an appropriate set of skills, and I got the job. But the long answer is that I mentioned I moved to Portland right after I got my first degree. My first degree was in physics, but I got really disillusioned with academia at the time and really spent a lot of time in Portland doing a lot of other things. So I did a lot of rock climbing. I worked at a makerspace and learned to weld, learned to do woodworking, and was sort of teaching myself the Python programming language on the side, just for fun and because I thought it might be appropriate later on. I'm always wanting to get into different things that I want to learn. Eventually I decided to go back to school about 2 years ago for a mechanical engineering degree. And it turned out that these Python skills that I'd built up that weren't really applicable to, or not that they weren't applicable, but they weren't part of the mechanical engineering curriculum, ended up being really useful for a bunch of different things. And that's what ended up landing me my first NASA internship, which wasn't at JPL. It was at their Langley Center in Virginia. And with that team, I was doing more machine learning and statistical analysis related stuff with Python. And yeah, so basically I went on this long journey of learning a bunch of things. And now that I'm back in school, this thing that I learned along the way has helped me land these jobs. Yeah.
What was something unexpected about working in a NASA internship that you only learned after you started?
Sure. Well, there's a few things. I guess I didn't expect there to be. So both of the teams I worked for were both research teams. So they were they're mostly working on projects that aren't so definite, and they're largely funded by grants, by internal grants through NASA or through JPL. And so a lot of their work actually ends up being analyzing what JPL or NASA needs and sort of tailoring what they can research towards it so they can receive the money to keep researching. The team I work on currently they're really professors. They work for a university and they're contracted through JPL. And so a lot of their work is focused on how to get paid, honestly, because they aren't permanent employees. Not that it seems to be a problem for them, but I think it's just the nature of doing government-funded research is that there's a lot of stuff you have to do to secure payment. So that was a little surprising, but it's been really interesting to learn about. Otherwise, I think I've been surprised, or just like pleasantly surprised by how easygoing everyone has been. I guess I expected NASA to be this really strict and sort of tight organization that's that plays by a lot of rules, and in some sense it does. But it's been really nice to have people be, really playful and humorous and everything as well.
What advice would you give current students or people that want to transition careers, like you were talking about earlier, that might want an internship at NASA like you have?
Sure. I mean, this might seem like really generic advice, but I think the most important thing just about anyone can do is just do what you find interesting and do what you love. I'm in a bit of a weird position. I mean, to be honest, I'm actually struggling a little bit with how the pandemic has affected me with virtual school, which I really wasn't enjoying. And the reality is I'm not very motivated by my salary. And so I have to enjoy my work. And actually to piggyback on the last question a little bit, the other thing that's been really surprising is that as much as I really enjoy working with Python and doing these kind of things, I've discovered this year that as a career, I really don't want to work alone at my computer in my room. As much as I'm like working for NASA and working for JPL, it's amazing. But I'm also struggling in certain ways just because the nature of the work is very difficult for me. So I think, be honest with yourself about what you enjoy and what's important to you. And just, I think everyone will sort of find a path that way, in my opinion.
What do you imagine as coming up in your future after your internship ends?
Sure. So I've been delaying going back to school until it's back in person. And as of right now, Portland is allowing their universities to be back in person in this coming fall term. So I intend to be back in school. And yeah, down the line, once I graduate, or I might be switching over to a higher level degree. I'm not really sure exactly what my plans are, but the overarching goal is to hopefully work for NASA in some real sense, not just as an intern. I've always had a dream of being an astronaut, but again, I have to be honest with myself. I think it might be a little bit too late for that. I'm also not like an Air Force pilot and a bunch of other things, but in my own way, I can, if working for NASA helps me help other people be astronauts or help us get probes and everything into space, that's a really cool thing to do. And so that's really exciting to me.
Besides earning money, what do you see advantages of getting internships at places like NASA?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's sort of a two-pronged thing where it's an incredible educational experience to work with, like literal rocket scientists, right? I wasn't working with rocket scientists, but real NASA engineers, and see what the see what the nature of their work really is. And these are all like really smart people. Everyone I work with has a PhD. I definitely feel like the dumb one in the room plenty of the time, but it's really just because I don't have the experience, right? But beyond that, I mean, it looks great on a resume, of course. And I don't know. I think if you take pride in your work and do these kind of internships, it really just gives you the confidence to do more and better things. So.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for sharing your story about how you went from one degree and then learned a bunch of skills and then moved on to internships, and also told us about what your future may hold. So please keep in touch.
Sounds good. I will, Peter.
Bye now. Talking Technicians is produced by MNT-EC, the Micro Nano Technology Education Center, through financial support from the National Science Foundation's Advanced Technological Education Grant Program. Opinions expressed on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the National Science Foundation. Join the conversation. If you are a working technician or know someone who is, reach out to us at info@talkingtechnicians.org. We're always looking out for great guests to share more stories with you.